Hello, Impact Makers. I'm Virginia Cincromani, a sustainability trainer, coach, and author. Welcome to The Good Communicator. You're probably wondering, what's The Good Communicator? It's your go-to podcast built exactly for you, the sustainability professional, to help you turn sustainability from a hurdle to triumph. Here, we break down the art of effective communication to make sustainability irresistible and co-create new futures. Come on a journey with me as we dig into proven frameworks and actionable strategies and demystify the process of influencing others in every episode. From building trust and using empathy in communication to overcoming resistance and inspiring action, we craft, we inspire, we co-create the perfect message that doesn't just remain in the head, but moves hearts towards sustainable change. Hello, Michaela, how are you?
Hi, Virginia. Very well. How are you?
I'm grand today. So thank you so much for joining me for this podcast episode. So we've been in touch for a long time on LinkedIn. We never met in person, unfortunately. Well, not yet.
It will happen.
I know we need to make it happen, of course. But one of the things that really put us in touch and we have in common is the idea of better communication one way or another, right? And a lot of your work is focused on biomimicry and using nature as a way of communicating. So do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and tell the audience, what you do, who you are, etc.?
Yeah. How long do you have?
30 seconds. No, I'm joking.
No, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I'm a communication specialist. I come from the world of branding and marketing, of all places, but also of international relations and weaving, translating from one culture into another, which has been something that I've been doing all my life and I continue doing, meaning I try to bridge cultures, languages, concepts, different approaches, breaking down silos. And a few years ago, when I discovered biomimicry, I was like, this is the ultimate translation tool, going through nature in order to put people together and also to mend our relationship to nature and to also inspire a little bit of awe that we all had as kids, and that we kind of forgot. So, yeah, I thought it was a fantastic tool to get people to talk together and to learn from nature instead of about it.
That's amazing. And in fact, shall we explain a little bit to what biomimicry is for anybody that doesn't know?
Sure. So, in very short, it is turning to nature with human challenges and finding in functional biology ways that nature solves the same or similar problems, abstracting it, and then taking back the wisdom of nature in order to foster regenerative and sustainable communication in humans.
So an example, like an easy example for people to understand, what would that be?
Yeah, so as I wrote my first book about, just because nobody had done it before, human communication inspired by nature, I was looking at what we could learn from nature, what topics we could find that are challenges for the 21st century, and looking at the way nature solves that. And funnily enough, without me planning on it, I ended up with 13 rules for communication, for regenerative and positive communication, that actually mimic the way cells communicate inside of a body. So if we apply the same rules that cells do without being, linked by a brain, uh, we can kind of, in a very natural and emergent way, work the same way as cells do in a body in order to make the organism stronger and functional.
That's what
It's
my
pretty
brain
mind
is
blowing,
blown.
yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, one example that I got, sorry, that comes back again and again and when I think about communication like nature does, is the fungi that are, in
Mycelial, yeah.
soil basically are the communication channel for trees, for example, which is something that when I discovered it was like, oh my goodness.
Oh,
I know, right? And they don't use words, obviously. They have ways of communicating that is obviously they don't have words like we understand them as humans. So there's and this also opens up to the possibility to use communication in different ways and to be a bit more creative than just focusing on our language, right?
even though words do matter.
Oh, absolutely. It's just I feel, as sustainability professionals, which is probably the majority of people that are listening, we focus all our attention on what we say. So the words, and sometimes actually words that the other people don't understand. So that's we create the barrier without wanting. But then there is our bodies as well that communicate, and there is the tone of our voice. We can use images, we can use, you know, other ways. We can use music, we can use so many other ways of communicating more powerfully. We can use our emotions mainly, right? And it's something that also nature, without again using human words, use so powerfully, right?
Yeah, so also another example, maybe to like familiarize the
Mm.
way people can understand. Uh, a very interesting species in communication is elephants,
Hmm.
because they don't have words as we understand them as humans, but they do use multimodal communication. If you look at a herd of elephants, they will, of course, have noises. They will trumpet. They will squeal a little bit. They might grunt, which would be our way of using words, but they also touch. Uh, if you look at elephants, they're always kind of touching each other, and the babies are touched by the trunks of the whole herd. They also work with infrasounds that we cannot hear, but that can broadcast to very wide areas. And also, they use the soil and their very sensitive feet to sense and send signals that nobody else can hear. At least we don't, in order to communicate kind of undercover. So, of course, they also, use their pheromones and pee and whatnot to delimitate their areas and signal their health and the size of their herd with other chemical signs. So I think we are more close to elephants than what we think. Not that I want to like pee pee on a branch of tree, but I might park my car in a certain place in order for people to know or not know that I'm there, which would be also a cryptic way of communicating.
That is fascinating. And how did you, by the way, how did you get interested in this? What was the origin story of, how Michaela actually approached this one day? I mean, do you have a story that you can share of how this
Yeah,
came to your attention?
it's it's kind of as great inventions happen, kind of by mistake. I'm trained as a safari guide as well, and as I could not travel to southern Africa in order to like learn more about the savannah, which is one of my favorite biomes, together with the Alps where I live, I was looking at courses online, and I was thinking, I'll find like a birding course or tracks and signs. And in the middle of all the courses I could find, there was an introduction to biomimicry, and I had never heard that word before. So I just clicked on it, and since it was not that expensive, I was like, okay, let's do that tonight. And after 20 minutes, I was hooked. I was like, this is finally all coming together. My love for nature, the translation of processes, systems, and functions, and the awe for nature, and looking at little things, looking at big things, a holistic approach, and all the metaphors that we can use in order to pull our communities and organizations together, as well as, it can be used for families and couple therapy, I guess. I never tried it.
I can see how that could work, actually. Yeah.
I think it could, yeah. And interestingly, as soon as I started writing my book, one of the first people to reach out to me was a woman in Italy that works with constellations.
Oh, yeah.
And she
Family
was like,
constellation.
"Oh my God, this is like a fantastic new metaphor for different archetypes." And we actually co-authored a couple of articles together for conflict resolution, which was extremely interesting for me because I didn't know. I kind of had a very high level idea of how constellations work, but applying nature to that, I think for family therapy or conflict resolution is absolutely valid.
And that actually takes me back to the subject of the last podcast I did with a graphic recorder or graphic harvester, Carlotta Cataldi, who was talking about the value of metaphors
Hmm.
in communication in general. Obviously she draws, and so that's her way, and obviously by drawing and using a metaphor, and you draw that little, the animal or whatever it is a metaphor. But for anybody else that they use words, I think a metaphor is so, so powerful to really translate maybe a complex message into something more accessible. And yeah, why not in conflict resolution to try and see, where else in the world, in nature, there is a similar situation that can actually help us address our own issues. Or if in the case of communicating sustainability, how can we actually transfer these complex messages that we're trying to sell to other people, to our audience, to our clients, in an easy, accessible way? So I think that this is really quite powerful, the power of metaphors, right?
Well, if you look at it, words are metaphors
Mm,
because what I want to do when I communicate with you is, you know, transmit from my brain into your brain what I'm thinking. And of course, there's always interference, but our privileged way with humans in this age is doing it through words. But words are already kind of approximations.
yeah,
I'm not sure that if I say a home, you're going to picture the same thing as I do. Or
yeah.
another one that you can get, like, what is love? What type of
Mm,
love am I talking about when I'm
yeah.
talking to you? What is the image that springs up into your mind? So even words are metaphors. So putting some flesh on the bone of the metaphor in order to maybe clarify it
Mm,
uh, through nature. Very funnily, this morning I had another conversation with somebody who goes into non-threatening communication through games.
mm,
And we were thinking, maybe games and nature are non-threatening ways of being able to talk about important concepts or realizations or thoughts without threatening people, without putting it into weird concepts that people are fearful of because they think they might have to learn something. It's a very intuitive way. Games and nature, I think, are like Trojan horses in a good sense
yeah.
of getting into people's lived experience.
And it's also an experiential way. So I think is again coming out of the word cage in a way, because again, like you said before, we might mean something but other people perceive a different message because we have different concepts in our mind, different structures the words sort of remind us of. But when we experience something like the game, like a walk in nature, like seeing animals interacting with each other, it's a much more human way, I would say, of understanding things. But human as in the wider sense of that. We come out of our brain and we get into our bodies, and
Yeah.
we have a more interactive, a more I would say authentic way of communicating. And that's why I'm such an advocate of using imagery and sounds and videos and examples and stories when we try and communicate sustainability. Because I'm so tired of, for example, reports that just have numbers and graphs, and it's just
KPIs, my favorite.
gosh. And, all these acronyms, they don't mean any, well, they mean something to the people that actually write those reports, but they don't go very far in terms of influencing others to do the same or to replicate, the good actions. There is so much good that is happening and is not being transmitted to other people because we don't know how. And I
Yeah.
think is that, I think the work that you do is so, so important to make, these concepts more, yeah, like authentic in a way and really go deep down into people's conscience.
I think it's also more holistic,
Mm,
because we're in a society of numbers.
yeah.
Uh, I think we can also, make a parallel with quantitative and qualitative
Mm,
market research or whatnot. I mean, one's great. The quantitative is nice because it's measurable and comparable, but the qualitative is where the fun is, and that's where you get the narratives. That's where you get the stories. That's where you can kind of figure out the way how to reach people. I'm personally very obsessed right now with the political polling, and then you have the polls that give you like hard numbers, which are halfway made up because of the methodology, but you have like comparative numbers 6 months ago and now, and projections, whatnot, with nice regressions and all this fancy statistical work you can do. But where you craft messages to convince people is by going to focus groups and asking people what their dreams are, what their expectations are, what their perceptions are, what would it make, what would it take for you to change your ideas, what would it take for you to change your behavior regarding sustainability. And that's where you have messages and connectors. uh, they're not data points, they're a path to action. And I think it's a little bit unfortunate that we are in a number KPI world when narratives are what drives people.
I think it's because numbers feel safe and controllable in a way. You can see them, you can measure, you can, well, emotions and stories can go in any direction. And I think people feel scared as well to share, something that might not land because again,
Yeah,
you don't
absolutely.
know what other people are thinking or what resonates with them. But my way of addressing this, and I'm sure you have something similar, is really to try and try and understand as much as possible who are going in front of me. Those focus groups, like asking, what do you believe in? What's important for you? What do you value? And then my stories, so once I understand my audience very well, my stories can become much more fit for purpose because
Yes,
I know what those people resonate with.
they become actionable because it's good to analyze something, but then to find a way of changing it or influencing it is what we wish to do.
Oh, absolutely. That's the biggest hurdle that we're facing, right?
And it goes through words or metaphors or incentivization of people, and it talks to the sense of purpose and not only of measuring, right?
Yeah. So that sort of leads to a question I wanted to ask you. So, when in the work that you do, what is the biggest communication challenge that you found so far? If you have an example, maybe in the past, before you found this way of addressing things, what
It-
was or maybe your pet hate, something that you don't like very much. We talked about numbers. I don't know whether that is one, but
I think something that I realized over time, and that comes with experience and life experience as well, is most people don't listen. And it's always amazing when I give workshops or trainings or coachings. People are like, how can I communicate better? It's the first thing is start listening, because listening is almost more than half of communication. uh, you can see televised debates where you have like, can be whatever, politicians or economists or even artists. You can see people getting ready to contradict the person instead of listening to the answer. So they're like gearing up their next expression instead of taking in what people say. And very much like in improv, nature improvises and it will be in the moment and see, listen, detect, be the antenna that gets the message before it responds. And that also allows for clarification. If I'm not sure that the question that you asked me was about this, I can say, do you mean this? And I can restate it instead of, going on assumptions of what you're asking me. So I think listening is underrated, very much so. And sometimes not doing anything is also communicating, right?
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think we are always listening to reply as opposed to listen to understand. And that is very, very common. I think we're so in our head with what we believe, what we want to communicate, the what, that we get really wrapped up in our heads and our thoughts and fail completely to listen. And it happened to the best of us, I think, at any
Yeah.
point. And I'm sure you've done a similar path to mine in that sense. I really, when I trained as a coach, I realized how much I wasn't listening. And
Yes.
that was a very humbling experience. It's like, I think a lot of my relationships actually failed because of that. Because I'm always trying to, say the next thing and say the next
We're
thing. And
also, in a civilization, let's say global north or global west, where action is valued and passivity isn't.
yeah,
Whereas I think active listening is not passivity, but I mean, listening carefully to what people want to say and clarifying the ask that is not always expressed goes a very long way. It's a great action to listen. It's
yeah.
not passive.
Do you know, that reminds me sort of a leap of, thought in that sense of the fact that some companies right now are putting nature as a silent stakeholder on their boards.
Yes.
I've came across even a website where it gives you all the legal documents to really make nature part of your board of directors, but without being silent and without really listening to nature, because nature cannot tell you exactly what you need to do. But is that almost passive active, I don't know how to call it, but really try and understand what nature would want to say if she, I'm giving it a female pronoun, but if she was sitting at the board and the boardroom and trying to say something. And I think that attuning with somebody or something that doesn't actually have a voice is so important for the next level of leadership. Really try and, instead of talking a lot, for me is also that ability to listen deeply to people but also to nature.
I think there's a misconception around this thing of putting nature as a stakeholder on your board or whatever. Uh, it's all great in theory, but nobody speaks for nature.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go on any board and be the voice of nature because I will go and into the biology and learn from nature, not about it. It's not an abstract concept. Nature does things all the time. Species, processes, systems are existent. But if you don't have a background in biology in order to understand it, I'm not saying everybody has to turn into a biologist, but uh, you have to look at it closely, which is the equivalent of listening, right?
Mm.
Listen to the lessons nature could show you, but who is going to do this translation?
Yeah. I think in simple terms that people are asking the question. So say during a board meeting, I said, okay, what would nature say right now about this particular decision? So in my field, I come from construction, it would be, okay, building this building right here,
Hmm.
what would nature say about this? In terms of water impact and energy impact and pollution of the soil. So even just asking the question can provide answers. Of course, though, if you were a bit more, if you wanted to go a bit more in depth, than having the understanding of the chemistry that goes on, and and how biology and the various species interact, because you don't know, for example, that by removing a certain tree in a certain area you might affect a species that are 500 meters away or a kilometer away, but you do. So it's
Yes.
that understanding and that deeper knowledge that would be absolutely so fundamental.
I'm interested by what you're saying, because you're saying, okay, what would nature say? But that's already a mythical creature, you know. Nature is not one person or one persona. It's like, I would look at it in a different way. It's like, let's say we implant this house here, right?
Mhm.
Instead of asking what would nature say, is like, how would nature do it? Would it put it here?
Ah.
Is this the appropriate place to put it? What will be the disruption or the fostering of natural processes if we put it here? Or how can we make more out of it if we like put it 20 meters left or right, or a little bit down from the mountain, a little bit higher up, or use a different material? How would nature do it? If you have this plot of land and you need to put this here, uh, how could we use the genius of nature to design it with nature's processes in mind, instead of what would nature say? Do you see what I mean?
I
Or is it
love it.
abstract?
Absolutely. Is is my thought to 2.0, really. I love it. And as an architect, that reminds me, as an architect, I did study a bit of biomimicry applied
Yes.
to buildings, because there are so many, some of the best structures in architecture are actually imitating
Hmm.
basically bit by bit what nature does. Like an architect, Santiago Calatrava, that does these fantastic bridges, fantastic infrastructures. They are exactly imitating what leaves look like, or
Yeah.
or even animals like spiders, insects, and that sort of thing. So, and it works perfectly.
Mhm.
People look at them as like, oh my goodness, it looks like something an alien would do. No, actually, if you look very closely, a leaf really looks like that.
Which maybe needs a clarification here. In architecture, which are they're at the forefront of biomimicry forever. I mean,
Mm.
we've been doing biomimicry all through
Oh yeah,
history.
I studied
It,
25 years ago plus, so I'm
I
not
mean,
talking about something that I've done.
no, but I mean, Leonardo da Vinci was doing
Oh yeah,
biomimicry, right?
absolutely, yeah.
So we've been doing it as far back as people have, observed bears and gone into caves the way bears do, to get shelter or whatever. So uh, you're talking about form, and that's where most people know biomimicry from. It's no, the shape of the train that does not disrupt the sound barrier, whatnot. But also, I think we could take it further as, what does this bridge fulfill as a mission? It
Mm.
connects this and this place. And why do we connect it here? Is this the right place to connect these two sides of the mountain? Or is there even a sense in doing it? How would nature solve that? Because the function we want to look at is connecting two places. How would nature do that? Would it do it in a permanent way, semi permanent way? Do you connect it only in the good season, the bad season, the rainy season? Do we even have to connect it? And if you like think of processes and systems, biomimicry has solutions there too.
Definitely nature goes for the most efficient, the best possible way for things to be done. So I can see that happen. I love this take on, what would nature do, and really asking that question, because sometimes we actually do things that are not necessary. We do
Yeah.
things in a way that is not the most efficient or the best for anybody, really, let alone nature. So I think that is a massive lesson that can definitely be learned.
Yeah. And
Love it.
listen, well, we can listen to it by looking at it, right?
Yeah.
Because again, you have to look at the process, and abstracting the process is already quite a lot of work, but it also clarifies what you're trying to do. Do we want to put a bridge there just because there's always been a bridge? Maybe it's better that there's not a bridge here. Maybe we can, go down and go back up. Or is there unintended consequences if we put a bridge here? What is going to happen when we do it, if we do it?
So because I always really like the practicality of things, and the stuff that I talk about have to be applicable, because we haven't got any time to lose, right? How do you work with people? Because you do some of this work is actually, consulting in a way that, advise people and teach people how to take that thinking in their daily lives. So if you had to give like a couple of tips on how can people, without having that biology degree, because some will but others won't,
Most
how
won't.
can you take that to your thinking in everyday work that you do in sustainability?
I think the first thing is for people to understand what they want to do. Why do what they want to achieve this? Let's take our example of the bridge. Do we need a bridge here?
Mm.
Is the bridge the best way of connecting these two places? Uh, maybe a tunnel's better. Maybe nothing is better. Maybe having a boat, a ferry, whatever is better. Um, so I think people should clarify the function they want to perform beforehand. And by doing this, you might find ways of collaborating with other people that are around and, kind of merge two similar uh, quests and find a solution that is multimodal, which will help me and also my neighbor. I always laugh at people having recycling bins but not sharing them with their neighbors. So everybody's got their little recycling bin, and then you get like 20 recycling bins side by side when you could have one, and everything would be more efficient. Or, in nature, there is no waste.
Mm.
So recycle, but I mean, why don't you like share it? I have, last week I had new blinds installed. And I was like, okay, I've got all this fabric from my old blinds. And so I sent out a message to my network and said, is anybody interested by so and so many square meters of linen that you can do stuff with? And I found somebody who's taking it over, and they're doing little bags for the marketplace. I don't know. And that's, repurposing something that's still perfectly fine, but I don't have use for it anymore. So communication is also about sharing what you
Mm.
need, what you dream of, and what you can provide. So we need to think more in terms of mapping than in linear processes, and ask about the function we want to perform with that and what we have.
Which is, I'm blown away right now, because obviously this is what nature does, right? I've been, since discovering in a way for myself, the value of co-creating solutions with
Mhm.
others. I realized that this is really the key that will unlock sustainability becoming mainstream. So long as we keep on working on our own, so long as we keep our own little fights, like, and I'm talking for the sustainability professions, like we literally like not looking at what's going on around us and just being desperate about it. But if we start collaborating, even better co-creating, like nature does, right? There is some
Mhm.
symbiotic relationships in nature. There are, animals helping other animals, just naturally coming together, like you said, for a common function. What do we want? What do we want to achieve? Until we will do that on a massive scale, we will not get to where we want to get.
Well, that's a relatively new phenomenon. I mean, I live in a place where there was very harsh scarcity
Yeah.
until 1950s. So people would reuse everything.
Mm.
And somebody who had like a shed that they don't use anymore because they don't have animals anymore, they will, the community will say, oh, let's make something else out of it, and let's store something else in there. And things would get repurposed just because everybody knew that, this place was free now, or somebody had left their house because they moved to the city, there was like, what do we do with this building? But now you've got so many empty buildings because it's mine and I only come here 2 weeks a year, and it's standing empty and it's heated and it's, the whole infrastructure, when you could share the use. uh, I'm very blown away. For example, in Switzerland there's lots of churches that are, used 2 hours a week,
Yeah.
on Sunday and Saturday evening when you have mass or stuff. But you've got these huge buildings that are beautiful and insulated and whatnot, and now the Protestant church around here rents out or lends out their churches to Muslim communities because they use it on Fridays.
Yeah.
Like, fantastic. I mean, at least you doubled the use. You still not 100% usage, which would be an aberration in nature to have, like, places that are not used for 98% of the time. Same goes with our personal cars.
Yeah.
I have a car that I use maybe 1 hour a day, but it's stored here for 23 hours of the day and night, takes up space.
And expenses, of course, because you have to
Yeah.
maintain it. Yeah. And on the church point, I'm Italian, as you know, and in Italy, thinking about giving our church to somebody from another religion, wow, my gosh, heresy, terrible. While here in the UK, for example, in the town where I am, there is a beautiful cathedral, and it's massive and it's very prominent, and is used every day of the week for a different religion. So there is the Catholic Mass and the Protestant Mass and the Muslim music too. And, anybody that needs the space is used, but also they do catwalks in there.
Yeah.
They do art exhibitions.
Yeah.
They host the scouts meetings. So the church is used every single day, possibly almost 24 hours a day. Obviously, it's convenient for them because they can maintain such a big place because it costs a lot of money. But it's also a fantastic shared resource, like a community space that is used in so many different ways, and people love it. And I think that's really the key. I mean, for them, I'm sure they did it for a convenience point of view because it cost a lot of money to keep a church of this size open just for, like you said, a couple of hours, a day at most. But I think it's also the sustainable way. Like you said, it's something that we have not really, I don't know, I think it's the post-war mentality where, people wanted the abundance of everything, their own thing, and not sharing and not struggling and not having to, you know, have that. In a way, community also meant that you were poorer and you had to share with somebody else, etc. Having one TV in a whole building, my dad tells me when he was little that
Yeah.
they would come together on a Friday night or Saturday night, and the whole building would, sort of go into the flat where there was a TV, 20 people around one TV to watch a show. This is something that we have completely forgotten. And I'm not saying, it's lovely to have the abundance and everything, but at the same time, we lost a bit the plot in terms of how we use our resources and how much we abuse resources from nature just because we are in our little, silos. So I think we're completely aligned in that sense. And
And
I love that.
it even goes further. We're
Yeah.
patenting ideas. Take my ideas, run with it, do something with it.
Yeah.
We're patenting processes that have been stolen from nature, kind of,
Yeah.
you know? And you're like, oh no, this is mine, or this is my technique to do my workshop. And every time somebody uses it, they'll have to pay me like 20 grand or whatever. Like, that's not the way this should work, right? If we go back to the church, we're very architectural today. But if you look at the what was the function of the church in the beginning, was to have a place where people gather
Yeah.
to worship, to have community, to have their picnics, whatnot, to bury people.
Mm.
What was the function? It was a place to share experiences and rights and create community. So why not lend it out to another faith that tries to do the same thing? It's the same
Yeah.
function, just for another, let's call it species. Not thinking there's a species here, but I mean, if you look at how nature does it, I was researching eagles' nests.
Mm.
So eagles build huge nests just with sticks and stones and whatnot, and they will have up to 12 nests in their area. And each year they'll choose the best one for this year. Maybe the sticks are the best, or maybe it's closest to a river because you need more water because it's warmer. I don't know how they choose it, but they choose, meaning there's 11 empty nests in their territory. They would, of course, not let any other eagles come here, but they might tolerate mice living in there, or bearded vultures that might use it because they're not in the same ecological niche. So nests get repurposed. The funniest thing as well is I have a cat here, and when I brush my cat, I put the hair outside, out the window, and I find so many cat hairs in the birds' nests because they use it as cushioning. And they're like,
Yeah, it's
that's
nice and warm and
that's
fluffy. Yeah.
sleeping with the enemy right there.
It's true. Oh my goodness. Using what the enemy discards for your own, but that's exactly the point. And I don't know how this can happen again, because like you said, up until probably the 50s, the 40s, this was natural and normal. We had less resources, things cost more, like clothes cost so much that you have to readjust them and give them to another brother or sister, or a cousin, and clothes will last for 50 years. So I don't know how we can go back to that, but I think the work that you do in terms of suggesting that on a business level can definitely make a difference in terms of how we think about
I think it's all about, building connections again, because
yeah,
I don't know how familiar you are with complexity. I'm sure you are. In complexity, what is important is not the nodes, it's the links.
yeah,
And if you create links just by communicating and saying, oh, I have this fabric, so and so many square meters of linen, you create an opportunity for someone to say, oh, I would like that,
mm,
or I could reuse this, or I know of my neighbor, they just moved and they need curtains. If you don't say it, nobody will know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we have to find ways of communicating our needs, but also what we can bring to the table. It can be ideas, it can be another connection. And that is only fostered through communicating openly and listening.
Absolutely. Three things came to mind, in fact, in that sense. So obviously you're talking about how, you call it complexity, other people might call it systems thinking, and a way
Living
of,
systems.
basically is the network that is the most
Yeah.
important element. Absolutely. And in fact, he enhances the value of each single element because of the connection. Yesterday I was at a workshop, a local, say, community initiative that is trying to it's interesting because it made me think about the needs. So this group, I'm not going to name them, but this group is trying desperately to create its own value without asking what the needs are within the community.
Ask people.
And I've been screaming. I'm like, okay, so they've been inviting people, sustainability people locally, because this is it's meant to be a sustainability network of some sort.
Mhm.
And they're trying to do the right thing. They post stories because they understand the value of stories. But yesterday my argument was like, okay, but do you know what people need? Say local businesses. If you write 10 stories and you put them on the website, but there is nobody's looking for them, why would they read them? Maybe the local sustainability, I don't know, marketplace needs stories about how to make their market greener, let's call it, very
Yeah.
basic terms, right? But if on your website you don't have a way of asking that question, if the network is just, again, speaking without listening, because that's exactly what's happening,
Mhm.
you will go in circle like
Mhm.
a crazy headless chicken, and you're not gonna have that network that you want. But even in the workshop, I was quite surprised because I was nearly the only one. Another person was following this logic, and people are like, oh yeah, we can post on social media and we can write blogs and we can offer services, but again, you're not thinking about the other side, the needs, because that's how a network is. It's demand and offering, is not just offering.
Right.
So
Right.
that's something that is happening even in sustainability circles, and it drives me absolutely nuts. So that's
Yeah,
the first
just
thing.
ask people. Ask people.
Ask people what
What
because
would
people
you
also,
need? What
but
is your
also,
dream?
absolutely, but also the other thing is they get the usual answers, which is, oh, we haven't got time. Say, for example, sustainable, well, not sustainable, but local businesses. They're small businesses. They are striving to, trying to make ends meet, etc. And obviously, when you talk about sustainability as an abstract concept, they're like, oh, we got time, we haven't got money for it, etc.
It's going to be expensive and complicated.
The usual stuff, right? We know that. But then you haven't asked them what they actually need
Hmm.
without mentioning sustainability. Do they need more customers? Do they need more exposure? Do they need, maybe they
Storage
need to involve
facilities.
the community? Whatever it is. But by asking that need, you have an example from nature, or you have an example from sustainability of how to actually meet that need.
Yes.
So I think we're not asking the right questions either,
We're not listening.
and we're not listening.
What would people want?
Yeah.
What do people want? There was a fantastic initiative here in a village that was getting a little bit depopulated, and they came in there and went. There's like 250 inhabitants, and they went to each of them. The ones who wanted to participate, I think they had 80 of them. They wanted to participate, and these people could explain what their dream was for their community.
Mm.
And then they had somebody who came and drew it. So they had, each of them had their dream on a like an A4 paper, and they had different people who drew it, right? But they had not been at the interview. So there's already a mediation, right? The person that took the interview and wrote it down and then sent words to somebody who drew it up. And they had a big exhibit in the village after 6 months, and the book with all the dreams. And then they mapped the dreams and they created something beautiful, which is, there was an empty building and lots of kids said, oh, there's no library or a place to hang out and play video games. So in a very old chalet that was not insulated, it just put a pod in there with a couple of video games and comic books. And now the kids hang out there, 8 years old, and they don't sit just in front of their own TikTok at home, and they go and do that. And the parents know where they are, and that created something very easy and beautiful. And I'm sure there's many others because I haven't followed the project further after that, but I know of that one. And they created it like a music festival. So, but very wide. You get classical music, and every month they have, something else happening. And so they can gather around that instead of nowhere.
And the beauty of something like that is that it's sustainable by default,
Yes,
because you
by
create
design.
community, you use the resources that are otherwise unused, you create, social cohesion, and so by default, without even naming, the S word, as
Mhm.
I call it, it becomes a sustainable it becomes a
Right.
sustainable, outcome, just by listening to people. That's beautiful.
And people lived together, but they were not aware that the other one dreamt of having like a place to play video games.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, cool, I want to have that too. And it created kind of a dynamic of people speaking to each other. They're probably all cousins too, but they never addressed that.
Yeah.
Thinking, oh, what do I want? Do I want a place where I can go and have a glass of wine in the evening on Thursdays? Oh, I'd rather have it on Tuesdays, and then I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe they're going to like invite each other. I don't know.
But that's going back to understanding the function, and
Right.
joining forces with other people that have a similar, dream, right, or need, or whatever you want to call it.
I love
Fabulous.
the idea of what is your dream. And that's also, I did a whole series of very short interviews about sustainable decarbonation of portfolios, which is kind of not very sexy, useful, but not very sexy. And I asked like experts all around the Swiss Romande, the French part of Switzerland. You had like academics and you had bankers and you had everyone in there. And I always ask them 4 or 5 questions. And the last one was always, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? What would you do? And that was always the best question and the best answer. And people came up with all kinds of things. It's like, get rid of bureaucracy, of course. And the other one's like, get really clean KPIs. And the other one's like, I would like everybody to slow down, or I would like for people to understand, and those are the best answers I got. And it that's also where the personality of people shines through. And so it's adjacent to what is your dream. I think what is your dream is a fantastic question to ask.
Yeah.
And if you meet someone new, instead of saying, hey, so what do you do? It's like, hey, what's your dream?
That's a bit, yeah.
Probably much
It's a
richer
lovely,
than
yeah.
oh, I work in a hospital 9 to 5.
That's a beautiful networking tip. Just be, think outside the box and ask people, what's your dream? Or if you had a magic wand, what would you want? Yeah.
I actually work on a project which was called 5 questions. Where we're moving on from that thing, but the whole idea was to say, if you had to ask people 5 questions to know them the best, what would you do? And it can be small talk in a networking event or first date, or ask your grandma you haven't seen, whatever. And I think the first question we had, and that's more like if you're trying to network or meet new people, is what brings you here?
Mm.
And people are, let's say you're at the opera and it's like, oh, I love Wagner. And somebody is like, oh, I got dragged around, and my wife really likes Wagner and I hate Wagner. And then you already start on something. What brings you here? And what's your dream? And so there's no questions like, what's your relationship to your mother? Isn't maybe not the best one to start
I
with.
can open a can of worms, I feel.
Or did you vote for Trump? I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's not the best question
Maybe.
either. But what's your dream? What brought you here? And if you had a magic wand for sustainability, what would you do? I think those are open questions. And most people are a little bit taken aback for 10 seconds, but they're very happy because you ask them, not about their job. It's like, what is your dream, right?
Yeah. I
So, yeah, design questions. That's what we're working on, designing questions to know people.
Do you know what? I got a networking event tonight. I'm going to use that.
Yeah,
I'm going to use that and I will
tell us
report back.
more tomorrow. What brought you here? You
Ah,
know?
wonderful. Okay. So let's wrap it up, Michaela, because I
Sure,
think I mean, I could talk to you for a whole day and a half
we can
and
do
be
it.
absolutely happy. And I'm not, I didn't even ask the questions that I wanted to, but that's beautiful because
That's
I think we had a fantastic chat.
emergent and complex.
Absolutely. So, the last thing I want to ask is if people want to get in touch with you, if there's anything that you want to share that you haven't shared, please say that now.
We'll be silent forever.
Or be silent forever.
No, so people can follow me on LinkedIn. Definitely, that's where you're going to see also articles I write about what nature can bring to the table in different contexts. I have 2 companies that we might link in the
Yeah, we
description.
will link in the show
There's one that
notes.
is a communications company and sustainability and communication and coaching. And the other one is a place based biomimicry, nature inspired think tank and research place that works with alpine processes and systems and species in order to shine a light on what we could do for places in scarcity and find solutions from masters that have survived 5 mass extinctions. So very big champions in harsh
Amazing.
environments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fabulous. You also brought a couple of books, so I'm going to put the link to that if you like,
Yeah.
or your website in there. And finally, and I'll just put them in the notes because they came to mind. If you're based in the UK, there are a couple of networks where you can actually share your stuff if you don't need it anymore for
Please.
free, like Olio and also Free Cycle. These are beautiful things, connected to what we were saying before. Really community-based, free sharing
Mhm.
networks. And another website that came to mind, I'm sure you're super familiar with that, asknature.org.
Yes, of course.
Obviously, where you can find ideas on,
Yeah, I think for
how
your
nature does
audience,
things.
maybe for your audience that's not familiar with biomimicry, if you don't have like a biology major
Yeah,
in your network, uh, abstract what you want to do and go to Ask Nature and just put the function you're looking for, and you'll see great suggestions. So yeah, Ask Nature is a very, very, very good first step into learning from nature.
yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Well,
Michaela. It's
thanks
been
for
such a
having me.
pleasure.
And
And
next time in person.
absolutely. In the Alps, please.
In the I'm not. Yes, I'm moving, but I'll be here.
All